Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're taking a look at GLP-1 therapies. You know, those medications that are really making waves in the world of metabolic health.
Yeah, they're definitely having a
So it's
moment.
like everywhere you turn, someone's talking about them,
Right.
especially semaglutide.
Yeah, for sure. And for good reason, I think.
So to kind of set the stage, could you give us a quick overview of what GLP-1 therapies are and why they're generating so much buzz right now?
Sure. So GLP-1s, or glucagon-like peptide-1 receptor agonists, are a class of medications originally developed for type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
They work by mimicking a naturally occurring hormone in our bodies, GLP-1, which helps regulate blood sugar
Good
levels.
sense.
But what's really gotten people excited is their remarkable ability to promote weight loss.
Oh, I've heard about that.
Clinical trials have shown that these medications can help people lose a significant amount of weight, sometimes even more effectively than traditional diet and exercise alone.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
And this has led to a surge in demand, with people seeking out these medications for weight management.
So we've got medical innovation meeting this massive consumer interest, it sounds like.
Exactly. And that's created this really dynamic landscape that we're going to explore today.
Perfect. So before we dive into the specifics, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. There's been a lot of talk about supply chain issues with these medications,
Right.
especially with semaglutide.
Yes.
Can you give us an update on that situation?
Absolutely. So there were some definite challenges with supply, which caused a lot of frustration for both patients and providers.
Definitely.
But the good news is that the FDA recently took semaglutide off the drug shortage list.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This signals that production has ramped up and the supply chain is becoming more stable.
that's got to be a relief for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And it should bring some much-needed peace of mind to licensed clinics that rely on these medications to treat their patients.
Right. Reliable inventory is crucial for providing consistent care.
Exactly. And it builds trust with patients, knowing they can count on receiving their prescribed medication without interruption.
Speaking of patients, Forbes recently published an article about the surging popularity of GLP-1s.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
They even used the term GLP-1 mania.
GLP-1 mania. I like that.
Right. It seems like everyone's hopping on board. What kind of market impact are we talking about here?
Well, to put it into perspective, UBS predicts that a staggering 40 million people will be using GLP-1s by 2029.
Wow.
And with the U.S. leading the way in terms of demand, it's safe to say that these medications are poised to have a significant impact on the pharmaceutical market.
Those are some pretty big numbers. And it's not just everyday people who are taking notice. Even Elon Musk has publicly endorsed Ozempic.
He has, yeah.
Mm,
And when someone with that level of influence speaks out, it definitely raises awareness.
for sure. It can really bring these medications into the mainstream conversation.
Exactly. But with this level of demand comes responsibility. We need to make sure that people are getting treatment that is not only effective, but also safe and reliable.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a crucial distinction. FDA-approved semaglutide versus compounded alternative.
Right.
Can you break that down for us? What are the key differences there?
Yeah, it's really important to understand the distinction.
Yes.
So FDA-approved medications, like the brand name semaglutide, have gone through rigorous testing and have to meet very strict quality and safety standards.
So you know exactly what you're getting.
Precisely. It ensures a consistent product and a predictable treatment experience for patients.
Okay, that makes sense. What about compounded medications? What sets them apart?
Well, compounded medications are essentially custom-made preparations.
Okay.
They offer more flexibility in terms of dosage or formulation, which can be beneficial for certain patients.
I see.
However, they don't always go through the same rigorous testing and regulatory processes as FDA-approved drugs.
So there's a bit more uncertainty involved.
Exactly. And while compounding pharmacies can be a valuable resource, there's a greater potential for variability in the final product, which of course can affect its effectiveness and safety.
Right. And for licensed clinics that prioritize patient safety and long-term brand integrity, I imagine sticking with FDA-approved semaglutide is the way to go.
I think that's a fair assessment. Especially with the supply chain stabilizing, there's less of a need to rely on compounded alternatives.
So it seems like it boils down to a trade-off between flexibility and consistency.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Now, so far, we've mostly focused on the weight loss aspect of GLP-1s. But I understand that these medications are showing promise in other areas beyond weight management, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's what makes this field so exciting. We're seeing a widening scope of potential applications for GLP-1 receptor agonists.
Really? Like what?
Well, researchers are investigating their use in managing diabetes, improving cardiovascular health, even potentially treating addictive behavior and certain rheumatologic diseases.
Wow. It's like we're on the cusp of a whole new wave of treatments.
I think so. The research is really promising.
To keep up with this growing demand and all these potential applications, how's the manufacturing of these medications evolving?
That's a great question. News Medical actually published a piece on this recently, highlighting the need for a modernized approach to GLP-1 production. They argued that by streamlining processes and adopting new technologies, we could not only enhance product quality,
Right.
but potentially even reduce costs.
So better treatments that are also more affordable, that would be amazing.
Exactly. And it would also help meet those rising regulatory demands, giving manufacturers a real competitive edge.
And with all these advancements in GLP-1 therapies, we're seeing impacts far beyond healthcare.
Oh, absolutely. The ripple effects are being felt in some pretty unexpected places.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, think about it. People's eating habits are changing, right?
Right.
And that's influencing everything from grocery store offerings to meal delivery services.
Really?
Even gyms are adapting their programs.
Wow, it's incredible how these medications are influencing not just individual health, but broader consumer behavior, too.
And that leads us to another key aspect of this whole phenomenon.
Hmm.
How are people accessing these medications, and what role is technology playing?
Good point, especially with telemedicine becoming more prevalent.
Exactly. Telemedicine has emerged as a major player in the GLP-1 landscape, particularly for those seeking compounded versions of the medication. It offers convenience, faster access, and often lower costs, which can be HM for a lot of people.
But I imagine there are concerns as well, right? Especially when it comes to prescribing medication.
Absolutely. There are valid concerns about potential overprescribing, a lack of holistic care, and the risks associated with compounded medications that might not meet the same regulatory standards as FDA-approved drugs. It's a nuanced conversation.
For sure. So where do things stand now with access to compounded GLP-1s? There have been some recent developments, right?
Yeah, there has. The FDA recently made an announcement that compounding pharmacies will no longer be able to produce copies of FDA-approved semaglutide.
Oh, wow. So what does this mean for people who've been relying on compounded versions?
Well, it's definitely shaking things up. Some companies, like Hims and Hers, are already adjusting their offerings. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
So a lot of change and uncertainty in the market right now.
Definitely a dynamic landscape.
It's clear that GLP-1s are making a major impact, not just on individual health, but on entire industries.
Absolutely.
It's a fascinating story to follow.
It is.
And this is just the beginning of our deep dive. What other exciting insights can our listeners look forward to in part 2? Welcome back, everyone, for part 2 of our deep dive into the fascinating world of GLP-1 therapies.
It's great to be back.
So in the last part, we talked about how these medications are impacting industries beyond just healthcare.
Right, we did.
You mentioned some ripple effects in places we might not typically associate with pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most fascinating aspects of this whole phenomenon.
I agree. So where do we want to start? What are some examples of these unexpected impacts?
Well, let's talk about the food industry for a second.
Okay, yeah.
Because if you think about it, GLP-1s work, in part, by reducing appetite and making people feel fuller faster.
Right.
So that's going to have an impact on how much people are eating and what kinds of foods they're choosing.
That makes sense. Are there any numbers or data points that illustrate this impact?
There are. Morgan Stanley's research actually suggests that GLP-1s can lead to a 20 to 30% reduction in calorie intake per patient.
Wow, that's a pretty significant decrease.
It is. And when you have millions of people potentially eating less, it's bound to have an effect on the food industry as a whole.
Absolutely. So how are companies responding to this shift in consumer behavior?
Well, in a few different ways. Some companies are adapting their existing products or creating new ones that cater to this growing market. For example, Thistle, a meal delivery service that focuses on healthy eating, has created menus specifically designed for GLP-1 users.
Oh, interesting. What sort of foods are they offering?
Well, their menus focus on lean protein, balanced nutrition to support those who are taking these medications.
Makes sense.
They recognize that people on GLP-1s might have different dietary needs and preferences.
So they're really tailoring their services to meet this specific demand.
Exactly.
Are there other examples of food companies adjusting to this GLP-1 boom?
Oh yeah, there are. Even Weight Watchers, which traditionally focused on weight loss through calorie counting and behavioral changes, has recognized the potential of GLP-1s.
Okay.
They recently acquired a telehealth company that actually prescribes GLP-1 medications to its members.
Wow, that's a pretty big move.
And they've also developed a new diet plan specifically designed to complement these drugs.
So they're really integrating GLP-1s into their whole approach.
They are. And I think it shows how seriously the food industry is taking this shift in consumer behavior.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah,
One change leads to another.
exactly.
And it's not just about the food industry, right? What about other areas of health and wellness?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of innovation in that space as well.
Can you give us some examples?
There are companies like Function Health that are focusing on monitoring the potential long-term effects of GLP-1s.
Okay.
They offer specialized lab tests to track things like nutrient levels and kidney function.
So they're really focused on preventative care and making sure people are staying healthy while they're taking these medications.
Exactly. It's all about taking a proactive approach to health.
Makes sense.
And then there's a company that was actually founded by an obesity specialist.
Oh, interesting.
They provide support systems for people taking GLP-1s, focusing on managing common side effects like nausea or dizziness.
Oh, that's really important.
It is. And it really highlights the importance of a holistic approach to health.
Right.
It's not just about the medication itself. It's about supporting the whole person.
I agree. Now, we talked about the food industry and the wellness space. What about fitness? Are gyms noticing any impacts from this GLP-1 trend?
They are. And it's actually leading to some interesting changes. For instance, some gyms are noticing that their members are experiencing weight loss and changes in body composition.
Makes sense.
As a result, chains like Equinox and Lifetime are starting to introduce strength-focused training programs.
Okay, why is that?
Well, because one potential side effect of GLP-1s can be muscle loss.
Oh, I see.
So these programs are designed to help people maintain their muscle mass while they're losing weight.
That's smart.
It's a really interesting way that gyms are adapting to this new landscape.
They're really thinking about the specific needs of this growing population of GLP-1 users.
And some gyms are even going a step further. They're actually offering in-house clinics where members can consult with doctors about GLP-1 prescriptions.
Wow, so they're becoming almost like one-stop shops for weight management and overall health.
It's really interesting to see how these lines are blurring between traditional fitness and healthcare.
Absolutely. It's a really integrated approach to wellness. Now, you can't talk about GLP-1s without mentioning the Ozempic face phenomenon.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's definitely become part of the conversation.
For those who aren't familiar, can you explain what that is?
Sure. So some people who take GLP-1 medications experience facial fat loss as a side effect.
Okay.
And because Ozempic is one of the most well-known GLP-1 drugs, this phenomenon has been dubbed Ozempic face.
Got it. And how is this impacting the beauty industry?
Well, we're actually seeing an uptick in people seeking out Botox and filler treatments to address these changes.
Really?
Yep. It's like this whole unexpected trend that's emerged as a result of these medications.
It's fascinating how something that started in the medical world can have such ripple effects in areas like beauty and self-perception.
It is. And it really highlights the interconnectedness of all these different aspects of our lives.
For sure. So we've talked about food, wellness, fitness, and beauty. What about fashion? Are they experiencing any impacts from the GLP-1 trend?
Absolutely. It's definitely having an impact on the clothing industry. For example, resale platforms are reporting a surge in plus-size clothing listings as people lose weight.
That makes sense.
And on the flip side, rental services are seeing a shift toward smaller sizes.
So it's like this dynamic market adjustment that's happening in real time.
It really is. It's reflecting the impact of these medications on body image and consumer choices.
It seems like no industry is untouched by this GLP-1 wave.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
We've talked about food, fitness, beauty, fashion. What about technology? Is it playing a role beyond just telemedicine?
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing a whole wave of dedicated GLP-1 tracking apps popping up.
Oh, interesting. What do these apps do?
Well, they allow users to log their dosage, monitor their weight loss, track their energy levels, and even note any potential side effects.
Oh, wow. So they're like comprehensive tools for managing the whole GLP-1 journey.
Exactly. And they provide valuable data and insights for both individuals and healthcare providers.
That's really cool. It sounds like technology is playing a key role in supporting this growing community of GLP-1 users.
It is, and it's making it easier for people to stay informed and engaged in their own health journey.
So we've talked about the impact of GLP-1s on various industries, but what about the broader implications for public health?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
For the first time in decades, Obesity rates in the U.S. are actually declining.
Wow, that's huge.
And research suggests that GLP-1s are playing at least a partial role in this positive trend.
That's amazing. So we're not just talking about individual weight loss, we're talking about potential shifts in population health.
Exactly. And that has huge implications for healthcare systems around the world.
Absolutely. Because if we can start to turn the tide on obesity, we can potentially reduce the incidence of all sorts of chronic diseases.
Right, like heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancer, joint problems, the list goes on and on.
It's really a game changer for public health. But with all this good news, there are still challenges, right? Especially when it comes to access and affordability.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. We talked about the FDA's recent crackdown on compounded GLP-1s,
Right.
and that has raised some concerns about whether people will still be able to access these medications if they can't afford the brand name versions.
It's a valid concern. Cost can be a major barrier for many people, even with insurance coverage.
Exactly. And some argue that restricting access to GLP-1s could actually be counterproductive, both from a public health and an economic standpoint.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about it. If more people have access to these medications, it could lead to a healthier population overall.
Right.
Fewer hospitalizations, lower healthcare costs in the long run, a more productive workforce. There are all these potential benefits.
Those are some compelling arguments.
And from an economic perspective, some experts believe that widespread GLP-1 adoption could actually boost GDP.
Wow, really? By how much?
Jan Hatzius, the chief economist at Goldman Sachs, predicts that it could increase GDP by as much as 1%.
That's a huge number.
It is. And it really highlights the potential of these medications to impact not just individual lives, but the economy as a whole.
It makes this whole conversation even more important.
I agree.
It's not just about health anymore. It's about societal and economic implications as well.
And I think this increased awareness is leading to a really crucial shift in the conversation around obesity itself.
Okay, in what way?
We're moving away from those simplistic notions of willpower and personal responsibility.
Yeah. Which we know are not really helpful or accurate.
Exactly. And we're moving toward a more nuanced understanding of the complex factors that contribute to obesity as a chronic condition.
So it's like GLP-1s are what can listeners look forward to in part 3. Welcome back, everyone. It's time for the final part of our deep dive into this incredible world of GLP-1 therapies.
I know, it's amazing how much there is to unpack here.
It is. We've covered so much ground already. We've talked about the science behind these medications, the market dynamics, the ripple effects across different industries.
Right, and we've talked about the public health implications and the economic impact.
Yeah, it's clear these GLP-1s are really shaking things up.
For sure.
But now I think it's important to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the ethical considerations surrounding these medications.
Yeah, that's a really important part of the conversation.
Because as with any powerful tool, there are always potential downsides or unintended consequences, right?
Absolutely. And with something as impactful as GLP-1s, it's crucial that we think about these things carefully.
So what are some of the key ethical concerns that have been raised?
Well, I think one of the biggest concerns revolves around body image and societal pressures.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
We live in a culture that often idealizes thinness,
Right.
and sometimes at the expense of overall health and well-being.
Absolutely. There's so much pressure to conform to these often unrealistic beauty standards.
Exactly. And so the concern is that with GLP-1s offering a relatively accessible way to achieve significant weight loss, they could unintentionally amplify those pressures.
Right. It's like this double-edged sword almost.
Kind of, yeah.
On the one hand, you have this potential solution to a really complex problem,
Right.
but on the other hand, it could exacerbate the very issue that it's trying to address.
Exactly.
How do we navigate that? How do we make sure that these medications are used responsibly and ethically?
Well, I think it all comes back to promoting a balanced and healthy perspective on weight and body image.
Okay.
We need to emphasize that GLP-1s are just one tool in the toolbox.
Right. Not a magic bullet.
Exactly. It's not a quick fix or a guarantee of happiness.
It's about health, not just appearance.
Right. And health comes in diverse shapes and sizes. We need to prioritize overall well-being, not just conforming to some arbitrary standard.
Absolutely. And I think it's also really important to acknowledge that weight bias and stigma are very real issues.
Oh, absolutely. They are pervasive.
And as we're having these conversations about GLP-1s, it's crucial that we include the voices and experiences of people who have historically been marginalized or stigmatized because of their weight.
Yes. Those voices need to be centered in this discussion.
We need to be mindful of the language we use and the messages we send to make sure that we're not reinforcing harmful stereotypes or perpetuating weight bias.
I think that's really important. It's about creating a culture of respect and inclusivity where everyone feels valued and supported.
For sure. Another ethical consideration that we need to address is access and affordability.
Right.
We talked in part 2 about the potential impact of the FDA's recent crackdown on compounded GLP-1s.
Yes.
And I think that raises some really important questions about fairness and equity.
Absolutely. If these medications are truly transformative for metabolic health, we need to make sure that everyone who could benefit has access to them, regardless of their socioeconomic status.
Exactly. And right now, that's not necessarily the case. Cost is still a major barrier for many people, even with insurance coverage.
It is. And the FDA's announcement could further limit access for those who rely on more affordable compounded options.
What are some potential solutions to this problem?
I think it's going to require a multifaceted approach.
Okay.
We need policy changes that help improve affordability. We need expanded access programs to reach underserved communities. We need to advocate for greater insurance coverage.
Right, a multi-system approach.
And we need to explore alternative payment models that make these medications more financially accessible to everyone.
So there's a lot of work to be done.
There is.
But I think it's really encouraging to see that these conversations are happening.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really glad that we're starting to have these conversations more openly.
Now, looking ahead, what are some of the long-term questions and implications that we need to consider as GLP-1 use becomes more widespread?
Well, I think one of the biggest questions is about long-term safety and efficacy.
Right.
As with any medication, we need more research to fully understand the potential benefits and risks of long-term use. What happens when people are taking these medications for years or even decades? Are there unforeseen side effects or interactions that might emerge?
Those are important questions.
And I think it's crucial that we continue to monitor these medications closely and adjust our recommendations as we learn more.
I agree. Patient safety should always be the top priority.
Absolutely.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to emphasize one really important point.
Okay.
While GLP-1s can be powerful tools for managing weight and improving metabolic health, they're not a replacement for a healthy lifestyle.
Oh, that's such an important point.
They work best when combined with a balanced diet, regular physical activity, and stress management techniques.
Right. It's about addressing those underlying causes of metabolic dysfunction, not just masking the symptoms.
Exactly. It's a holistic approach.
And ultimately, that's what's going to lead to sustainable, long-term health and well-being.
So it's been an incredible journey, wouldn't you say?
I know. I've really enjoyed this deep dive.
Me too. What key takeaways do you hope our listeners walk away with?
I hope they understand that GLP-1 therapies represent a remarkable advancement in metabolic health. They have the potential to really transform how we manage weight, improve blood sugar control, and reduce the risk of serious health conditions. But like with any powerful tool, it's crucial that we use them wisely and ethically. We need to be mindful of societal pressures, we need to address issues of access and equity, and we need to always prioritize a holistic approach to health and well-being. That's where true transformation lies.
Those are some really great points. And I think as we continue to learn more about these medications and their long-term effects, these conversations are only going to become more important.
I agree. It's definitely a space to watch closely.
So to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this incredible exploration of GLP-1 therapies. We hope this deep dive has provided you with some valuable knowledge and insights to help you navigate this exciting and evolving field.